Hi, I'm Dr. Gemma, and welcome back to Cognitive, the Knitting Psychology podcast. Cheerfully and somewhat irregularly in business since 2008. Segments today may include what's on my hooks, needles, and spindles, a strategy, something I really like, put a lid on it, oh shoot, and blather. So sit back, put your feet up, pick up your knitting, crocheting, spinning, weaving, or dyeing, or any other yarny thing you're doing, and get ready to enjoy. Well, hello, I'm Dr. Gemma, and this is episode 170 of Cognitive. Your comments are very welcome, and so you can comment either on our group on Ravelry, which is just called Cognitive in the Groups section, I believe, or you can comment on the blog, which is cognitivepodcast.blogspot.com, but don't forget the K in cognitive. I had a question this week about the podcast notes as linked to the podcast, and I had not realized it, but yes, my notes are very tightly linked to the podcast. So sometimes you're going to hear comments in the podcast that may not make a lot of sense unless you look at the notes. I don't know if it should really be that way, but it's developed that way over all these years. But, if you're not following along in the notes, that's great. The notes are really just a place to put links that I mentioned to things in the podcast. I want you to be able to get to the information I list. You can tell why I'm thinking about this if you look at the notes, because you will see in the warm thanks that I encountered a person who I believe has become a new listener. That would be Nancy, who I met in the yarn aisle at Joann's. We had a lot of crochet fun looking at colors and talking and whatnot. And it really made me stop and think what this podcast must sound like for people who are new listeners. And I realized, it's probably a bit confusing. So thank you, those of you. I think if you're going to listen to this podcast, you kind of have to follow it for a few episodes to see if you can work it out. But I don't know what to say about that. I think most podcasts are like that they refer back to a blog of some sort or show notes. But anyway, in the warm thanks, there is new listener Nancy. Welcome. I hope it all makes sense eventually. I also wanted to thank Jasmine Knitmore. I should probably do that every episode. Jasmine and Gigi is a matter of form. But anyway, I was amused because Jasmine was commenting on the Mrs. Magoo thing, saying, shouldn't that be Dr. Magoo? Hadn't thought about that. Okay. But Jasmine also points out that Judith McKenzie, of long fame in the knitting world, says, be careful, because if you try to freeze anything that you think has moths in it, actually, freezing is part of their life cycle, so that probably won't kill them. They're designed to survive it. I have tried it before and it didn't work, but okay. I think really the easiest way to get rid of moths is to cook them off. And then another question, I think this might have been from Gigi, is, but what about scorching? Again, to get a scorch, you have to hit ignition point. So I think it would be pretty hard to scorch wool yarn. However, acrylic yarn is going to melt. And as for everything else, silk and the other fibers, I think you have to look these up on a case-by-case basis. But thanks to Jasmine for pointing that out about freezing the moths, because I tend to agree with her on that. I tend to think Judith McKenzie is a great authority, and Jasmine's no slacker either. Prairie Poet, thank you for the reminder about Ann Budd's book of top-down sweaters, which our buddy Sal Pal also endorses. And I have added that book into our list on Ravelry of good knitting books. And there's a link to that further. I'll come back to that. I went to that thread on the Ravelry group for Cognitive, and I realized it was a bit messed up. So I went in and edited that list. Also, on any of these threads of resources and information, you should feel free to go in there and add anything that you would like other listeners to know about. This shouldn't just be Dr. Gemma's ideas, because I'd really like to build a good resource for anybody who's looking for stuff And I just found a good one today about hexagon sweaters, so I'll get to that later. But yeah, any resources you find that you think the group might be interested in, absolutely. So thank you, Prairie Poet, for that reminder, and Sal Pal also, who endorses it. Meanwhile, the wonderful Steffi Joe sent us a link from Ram Dass, which is a meditation on Just Like Me, which I was talking about before. Ram Dass, who was really just a powerhouse of bringing Buddhism to the Western world. He had a meditation to develop compassion using the logic Just Like Me. That's a wonderful reminder. Thank you very much, Steffi Joe. I think it's kind of important to realize that we were talking about this last time when I was talking about perfectionism, and I was talking about how perfectionism, actually I think this might have been episode 168, how perfectionism alienates you from people. And that's one of the big dangers we don't talk about. We talk about putting too many demands on yourself. But there's a whole other aspect that you are isolating yourself from the rest of the world if you're treating other people as though they're imperfect, but you're somehow going to achieve perfectionism. And so Ram Dass, I think, very shrewdly sees that as relating to the issue of having compassion towards others. So thank you, Steffi Joe, for that link to the meditation. I have the link in the show notes if you would like to meditate along with it. Meanwhile, Cognitive Fiber Retreat 10, that is CFR 10. All the information is right there. There is a link in the show notes right under Warm Thanks. Cognitive Fiber Retreat 10 is in red, so you should be able to find it. But there's a link right there, and it will take you to the information thread on Ravelry where we have the current information on CFR 10. And I will return to that in the calendar. Meanwhile, what is on my hooks and needles? Well, hooray! Buddy Nancy was flying out from New Jersey, and she wanted to meet at Universal Studios, and she wanted one of the cowls, but she really wanted dragon paws, which was so perfect for me, because as I was knitting my Romeo 23 sweater, the old friend sweater, I realized that I had this oddball skein of Noro Silk Garden, and it was in these wonderful dragon colors, which you can see if you look at the picture in the show notes or on Ravelry, that it was just so perfect. I tried to do the longer part of the glove that is not the crocodile scales. I tried to do that in one of my hand spuns in a silk camel, but I just couldn't pull it off. It was too irregular. And so I learned something important, which is the dragon paws are best done in scrap yarns that you'd like to get rid of, number one. But I've always held that truth, that they're a great stash buster project. But also, you want contrast between the arm of the dragon paw and the actual scales. And so I kind of like the rough effect of the Noro. It's very rustic. Against the very smooth effect, that is the gray yarn, that is Mighty Stitch from Knit Picks. I said incorrectly last time that it's pure acrylic, which made me wonder why I bought it. Because frankly, you can get acrylic a lot cheaper in other places, like a big box store. But I realized it's a wool acrylic blend, mostly acrylic, of course. And that gives it a very nice, smooth hand, and it works very nicely. It's a mill spun, of course. But that worked very nicely, and I really would like to get rid of that skein of the gray. Why am I using Mighty Stitch? I got that recommendation from Bad Wolf Girl Sits and Knits, or Bad Wolf Girl Knits, depending on where you pick her up. She is the designer of the sweaters I've been making recently, with the exception of the Romeo, the Llama Love, and the one with the black cats, the Superstition. Okay, meanwhile, in progress, the stash toss. Well, I bought some yarn, and that's because I would like to make a hexagon sweater. This is a fad right now among the crocheters, and I just think it's a great idea. To be specific, I want to make a cardigan. I really like making my cardies out of acrylic, believe it or not wool, because I want them to be on hangers in my closet, and I will never get over my fear of moths. I keep my wool stuff folded up neatly in sealed plastic containers. And also, the first one out of the chute, I want to make it because it looks like it's a pretty fast crochet. All sweaters are a pretty fast crochet compared to knitting, let's be honest here. And it's easy. It's a very smart design. It's sort of one of these trends that you find on Instagram. You don't really need a pattern, but nonetheless, there are good patterns, and I will come back to that. So anyway, I bought 4 skeins of acrylic, and they are the softer acrylics, the Karen 1 pound type of thing. And I decided to make it Valentine's Day colors, just in red, pink, and white, because, I want that. So now we're up to 11 skeins in and 26 skeins out. So I'm feeling pretty happy about that, because the Dragon Paws took out 2 skeins. So that was very nice. 2 very small skeins, and I'm happy to say it. Meanwhile, I'm still working on the 5th CFR 23 sock yarn cowl. And I just keep saying this is a little embarrassing, but I'm so addicted to this. You cannot believe how much leftover sock yarn I have gotten through by doing these 5 cowls. And 2 of them have already gone to new homes. 1 to my friend Nancy, another to my friend Judy in New Jersey. I just love these. And I think I'm using number 3 as my pet. But I'm really happy with these guys, as you can tell. So I haven't really been working on that too much. I've added like 2 rows. You'll see it when it's finished. Meanwhile, the Stash Dive 1 socks, which is yarn I bought in 2010 in, I believe, Tempe, Arizona? Tempe or Mesa, I forget which. Anyway, I finished a sock. Yay! And I'm well on my way towards the heel of the next sock. I do mine top down. I've had a few people who've been asking me about the Afterthought heel. And again, I talk about it very specifically in episode 169, where you get it from, that sort of thing. Which reminds me I should add that source to the book list over on Ravelry in the resources group. Nonetheless, the Afterthought heel, in that picture, it's very crinkled up. I'm not really sure why. The sock looks just fine. But anyway, I put a picture of it because I'm in love with that colorway. It's called Sedona. If you've ever been to Sedona, Arizona, you know why I'm in love with it. Anything that reminds you of Sedona. Also, I was thinking how rustic looking that yarn is. Well, this is kind of a duh. It's because it's not plied. It is a nylon wool blend, but it looks like it was simply blended on a drum carder and then single ply spun into yarn and then fixed into place. Like, I would assume they wet it in some form and that freezes the spin. That's why it looks so rustic. It's a single ply. I really hate that. I really almost never will work with a single ply in a sock. I don't like single plies in general, but I bought it in 2010. I was young. I was innocent, and that is one heck of a colorway. Vestuary 24, I'm making no progress on. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's because I'm getting caught up in these socks, I think, and the whole hexagon thing and the Dragon Paws and Nancy's visit. But you remember Deep Stash Dive 2, those socks that are yarn that I bought in 2007 from Lyman Violet before I even was knitting socks. Well, because I'm doing this in the Blueberry Waffle Socks pattern, that is a 4-row repeat. So every day I just do 1 repeat, and that's going along handily. As you can see, I am past the waste yarn for the Afterthought heel. I took a picture of it with the waste yarn facing up because I wanted people to see, since people were asking about Afterthought heels, I wanted people to see that's what the waste yarn looks like. It is only 2 half rows. So you stop everything on the front of the sock and you take your waste yarn and you knit half the stitches. So I have a 64 stitch sock. It's what I use commonly. So you knit 32 stitches. And then you turn around and go back with the waste yarn and knit 32 in the other direction. And that means you have 2 rows, 2 half rows on the back side, or what's going to be the back side of the sock, where your heel will be. And also it will be where the bottom of your foot will be. Okay, and so you can see those 2 half rows there. And you're going to take your needle and go above and below those waste yarn rows and then pick out the waste yarn is the basic there. I'm not going to explain it again because I'll put you to sleep for a second time. The other thing you can see when I do the blueberry waffles, I do the pattern on both sides all the way down to the heel. And then after the heel, I'm only doing the pattern on the top of the sock, on the top of my foot. The bottom of the sock I do in a stockinette. That's why it looks the way it looks. But I wanted you to see a waste yarn insert for the Afterthought heel in action there. So if you look in the show notes, you can see that picture. You can also see this was a striping yarn, but I'm just way out of tension for it. I don't know why I was not getting the right tension to get the striping to work. It's not too bad, but it's not too good, believe me. And so I decided to instead use the blueberry waffle sock pattern and hope that that would somehow make it look better than this sort of typical splotchy sock one gets when one does not knit in quite the same tension to get quite the same gauge to get the even stripes. So I'm kind of happy. It's a very pretty sock in its own strange blotchy way, but anything with blueberry waffle. The blueberry waffle sock, very easy. 2 rows stockinette, 2 rows of knit 2, purl 2. That's the pattern. Very, very easy thing to do. The Dizzy Blondes, I'm not doing any spinning. And so under that, I have the links that are over on the Ravelry group for Cognitive for the podcast. So I have 3 separate links there. The first is the books I'm using for patterns. So it's just called a Knit Crochet Library, and there's a link there. The next thing is my resources that I am buying to support my knitting and crocheting. You may notice at this point, if you're new, that I talk like I am primarily a knitter. That's just habit. I have to admit I'm kind of divided right now, and I'm glad that crocheting has come into vogue. I really am. When I started, knitting came into vogue first, and I was doing knitting. It was the new yoga and all that stuff, and so that's when I learned to knit back in the early 2000s, I think about 2004, 2005. And then after my son was born in 2006, I started crocheting somewhere after that, not very long after. So in case you're wondering. But anyway, my favorite resources, things to buy, places I buy from. These are the more eclectic places. I don't have knit picks or webs on there. I probably should at this point, but anyway, there they are. And then the third link is to various skills and techniques that I've encountered for both knitting and crocheting. I don't think I've got any crochet up there, but I'm about to change that, I hope. Meanwhile, onto a strategy. And really, I'm switching gears a little bit. We've been talking about perfectionism, but now I'm talking about overthinking. Why? Come on. If you're a perfectionist, you can already guess what that relationship is. That perfectionism is a sort of outgrowth of overthinking. But there's so many ways to overthink. I could spend weeks on this one. In fact, I probably will. Overthinking gets called a lot of things in my world as a psychologist. It gets called ruminative thought, obsessive thinking, intrusive thinking. A lot of times that comes out of which diagnosis it's being associated with. But the reality is, in almost every mental health problem, and in that category, I'm not just including diagnoses your doctor might give you. I'm also talking about just plain old stress or worrying, whatever. In all of these things, people are thinking too much. People are overthinking. They are not controlling what goes on between their ears. And often when they come to me, they represent it as simply uncontrollable. They talk about themselves as helpless, as though this overthinking invades their brains, like it's this outside thing that takes over their brain and they are not able to fight it. And no. No. Now, it does feel like that. I overthink. I'm here to tell you. It does feel that way. You're just going along, minding your own business, doing something, and you finish doing it, or maybe you don't finish doing it, and you're suddenly remembering some painful event from, I don't know, primary school or something, and suddenly you're living it. You're going through it, and you're thinking about the people who made you angry, and blah, 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 blah. Now, the interesting thing, you notice people don't do this with happy thoughts. You don't have people, there are a few, that's a whole different diagnosis, but mostly people don't walk around saying, I just can't stop thinking about this happy thought I had. All right, why? Why not your happy thoughts? Very simple. I've said this before. Humans are dopamine junkies. We do things to get dopamine. Dopamine is the pleasure chemical in our brain. In excess, we do things like addiction, because addiction is a sort of short circuit to get you the dopamine fast without too much effort. So overthinking is a dopamine thing, that you're trying to get rewarded for solving a problem. That's one of the ways humans get dopamine. So humans have succeeded on the planet as much as we have succeeded because we are problem-solving animals. We're very addicted to the chemical high on dopamine that we get when we solve a problem. So your painful memories represent these kind of problems for your brain. Oh, if only I could fix that thing I did 50 years ago, if you're me, or 55. Ooh, I'm old. And so you go back to these painful memories because really, to your brain, these are problems. And all you want is to solve your problems. And when you work on a problem, even if you don't solve it, you get a dopamine hit. That's called worrying. You just keep going over the same territory endlessly, and you can't solve it. So, man, this is a dopamine thing. You can just go back anytime you want and get more dopamine hits. And as I have said before, I would be fine with that, except your brain is rewarding you with dopamine. But when you are trying to solve an unsolvable problem and worrying or ruminating, your body starts punishing you because you're not fixing it, because you're spending too much time on it. Your stress levels go up. You start releasing toxic chemicals, the corticosteroids. Not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. This is why stress does eventually kill people. Takes a long time, 20 or 30 years, but it does happen. All right then. So what are we going to do about the overthinking? Well, first thing is you have to accept the reality that there's two processes going on in your head. One is the set of processes from your brain. Your brain is a machine, that's all it is. And machines do the same thing over and over again. So your brain says, I want dopamine, okay, so let's get dopamine. So maybe you go get drunk. No, not a good idea. But maybe you say, well, I'm not going to do drugs. I'm not going to get drunk. So you eat too much happy food like ice cream and then you don't feel good and that's not good for you. Or you worry and you're releasing the corticosteroids that are eventually going to kill you from the stress, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's your brain. It's a machine. It does the same thing over and over. All right, my car is a machine. And to give you the model that I give my patients, I get in my car, I put the key in, I turn it on. Here's the exciting thing. My car can only turn on the engine. When I put the key in and turn it on, my car does not beep the horn, roll down the windows. Now, it has been trained to lock its own doors, but that came later. In my childhood, it didn't do that either. We had to push down a button. Oh, times were hard. Okay, but the idea is cars are stupid. Machines are stupid. Machines can only do exactly what they're told to do. They can't innovate. And if you want to change a machine, it takes a lot of work. Okay, so now when I turn on my car, the engine comes on and the doors lock. All right, they didn't do that when I was a kid. There was this button on the side you had to press. And so it took engineering. They had to take apart the car doors, take off the button, and wire the car door into the ignition system. So now, yes, I turn on my car key and the doors lock. But you notice that took a lot of engineering? That's right. Machines are fundamentally stupid. To change a machine takes the other part of the brain, a human mind. What is the mind? We don't know. We know it's there, but we're very confused about it in the healthcare world. The American Medical Association finally admitted it existed. Oh, it exists rather. And I'm not going to go into that whole thing. It's a fairly recent thing that they admitted because they have just too many anecdotal examples of people who should be dead and yet can see what's going on, even though their eyes are closed and their heart has stopped. And yet, if you revive them, they come back and tell you everything that went on in the room. How are they doing that? If their brain isn't working and their eyes are closed, how are they doing that? Apparently, there's some kind of consciousness. That's what I'm calling the mind. Why am I telling you the mind versus the brain? Because the mind has to run the brain. The brain is just a machine. It's basically stupid. It does what it's programmed to do and nothing else. Okay, so you have to run your brain. When I say you, I mean your mind has to run your brain. And so when people come in my office and they say, I can't stop overthinking, that I'm just flooded with these thoughts. Yeah, that's all true. But what they're really doing is they're reporting, my brain is running wild. And I don't know how to use my mind to reprogram it. So the wise cultures of this world, the wise people have been trying for millennia to figure this one out. And I'm going to be talking about that a little bit for the next few weeks. But the first concept I want you to get is you are in charge between your ears. You are. Nobody else is. Nobody else can do that unless you give them permission. So for example, you go into surgery, yes, you allow them to give you anesthesia, in which case your mind gets turned off for a while. Well, actually, we don't even know that, but I'm just saying that's kind of how we experience it. Because your brain, the machine that's holding a lot of your mind, but demonstrably not your whole mind, which is kind of wonderful and weird at the same time. But, you can sedate your brain, and that will shut things down, and so you're not very aware of what your mind is doing in that state. Okay, so if you give somebody permission, yes, somebody else can take control of between your ears. But the reality is, even in hypnosis, you're in charge of what's going on between your ears. So if you're having painful thinking, or if you're overthinking, can't stop your thinking, you can. You're in charge. And the wonderful question there, people say, no, you're wrong, I can't do that. I get that all the time. The answer is, yeah, but it takes a lot of work. There's a reason why mindfulness and meditation are so in fashion right now, because we're all beginning to realize we have to control what's going on between our ears. So the question I always tell people is, you have this painful thinking, right? And they say, but I can't stop it. And I say, well, what would you do if you did? And they say, what does that mean? And I say, well, if you're thinking painfully about this bad event in your past, I don't need a concrete answer here, but how much of your time do you think that takes? And if it's taking a lot of your time, and so it's causing you pain, releasing the corticosteroids, the bad chemicals, what would you do if you could get that time back? What would you do instead? And this is really important, because when you're controlling your own energy, you get a lot more done. And you have to be careful, because there's a lot of stuff on social media saying rest more and don't be so goal-directed and all that. Listen, maybe all that's true, I don't know. But the reality is, the other thing in balance with that for me is people are always saying to me, wow, you get so much done. That's because I'm not overthinking if I can help it. In other words, once I take away that energy from overthinking, it's mine. And I can use it to read, I can use it to learn, I can use it to crochet or to knit. I can use it to enjoy my family, to look at beautiful pictures from my past. I can listen to music, I can listen to books. I can do a whole lot as long as I take control of the energy going on between my ears. And to do that, that means I'm going to push back against overthinking. So this first part of overthinking, I'm giving you the model. What is going on when you are thinking too much, worrying, reliving the past, ruminating, whatever you want to call it? What's going on is you are donating your energy to things that hurt you for the sake of dopamine, for that chemical. So where would you like to get your dopamine instead? I'd rather get it from learning. I'd rather get it from studying, watching TV, playing a video game. I'd rather do that than give my energy away to this process that is only hurting me both emotionally and physically. Where is your energy, and would you like it back? You are perfectly able to take it back. This is where I refer you back to that lovely meditation that Steffi Jo gave us. Meditating is one way to learn to control it. It's one of the most successful ways we know of to learn to control your thinking. Why? When you meditate, and I tell people start with 1 minute. I'll usually do it in my office with them, or start with 2 minutes, because that's practice. When you meditate and you focus on one thing, which is the easier way to start than trying to just empty your mind, but you just focus on one thing and you push out every other thought. What are you really doing? You're practicing a skill. You're practicing taking over your thinking and dismissing the thoughts you don't want. So you can do it. People have been doing it for millennia. It is in most of the major religious faiths. It's there somewhere. All of this is about where are you putting your energy. And when you put your energy where you want it to do, there are health benefits. You stop releasing those bad toxic chemicals. Okay, anybody who just said, but Gemma, we use corticosteroids to wake up in the morning. Yes, It's in your body for a reason, but you're not supposed to overload. There's a difference. Moderation, guys, moderation. Okay, so the idea is, where is your energy? Where are you putting it? And you're using it, if you're overthinking, to get dopamine the wrong way, in a way that damages your body. Now, going back to what I taught you many moons ago in dialectical behavioral therapy, this is the core thought behind what in DBT we call the distress tolerance skills. What are they? They are the skills of distraction. They are the skills of taking your energy and refocusing it in a positive way so that you're not chemically killing yourself with corticosteroids in the pursuit of dopamine. The whole point here, where is your energy? Why don't you start trying to put it where you'd like it to be? And in America, we say, so why don't you be more productive? Yeah, that's one way to look at it. You can get more things done, or you can focus on not doing things, watching TV, which isn't much of an activity in terms of productivity unless you're paid to do it, or playing a video game. One of the interesting things here is sidelight. You notice how the younger generations are really hooked on the internet, on the video games and the internet. And a lot of us are, frankly, not even, you don't have to be that young. My generation, we were mostly hooked on TV. Why is this happening? My fathers, they were hooked on radio. Why is this happening? That's people trying to use their energy in a way that does not bother them. Humans have a lot of this mental energy. We have to put it somewhere. Where are you putting your energy? That's going to determine how you get past overthinking. Oh, shoot, yes, I am still cycling along at 20 minutes per day on my bike desk. I think by the time you hear this, I might be on 25 minutes. The benefits of that are beginning to really show. My legs look a lot better. My weight looks a little bit better. Now remember, you don't really exercise to lose weight. You exercise to make your body more efficient. When your body is more efficient and you eat properly, that's where you're going to lose weight. The more efficient your body is, the better you lose weight. Like the oil in a car. The oil doesn't fuel the car. Exercise is the oil. It just makes the car run better. Makes the body run better, including the way you use up your food, but also every other way. Just saying that because I'm having a good time. 20 minutes a day on my Fit Desk. That is my bicycle that has a desk mounted on the handlebars. I love that thing. One of the best things I ever bought. Unbelievable. I sit there with one of my tablets, and usually I'm just going through social media or reading or listening to music or some combination of the above, researching things. I love it. So that's going great. And meanwhile, on the fluffy books, I'm still in the Alexander the Great docudrama on Netflix. I'm enjoying it. I'm kind of relieved. Like I said last time, they get a little stuck. They're trying to talk about Alexander's relationship to the Persian royalty. It's interesting. I think there's just not enough there that we know, but it's very interesting. I was complaining when I watched the first episode that they're trying to blame Alexander's mother for the murder of Philip of Macedon, when to me it seems really obvious that was probably Alexander killing his own father, because those guys were brutal in Greece at the time about possession of the throne, and Alexander had been severely insulted by his father to the point where he'd gone into a voluntary exile over it. Well, we've got another moment of woman blaming where the Greeks, that is the Macedonians, really capture the Persian royal women, the wife of Darius the emperor and their daughter. The idea here is, historically, a lot of people seem to have suggested that the empress, I think her name is Statira, may have ratted out to Alexander a way to succeed in taking over at least part of the Persian Empire, namely Egypt. And that may be a bargaining chip she used to protect herself and her daughter. That is the most stupid thing I've ever heard. I have to tell you honestly, this guy is a brilliant strategist. And, you know, whatever else he is, brutal, whatever, philosopher, poet, all the stuff they attribute to him that I haven't gotten that part yet, why I'm supposed to believe that about him. What you get in the early part of his career is he's utterly ruthless. And he's very, very good at strategies of war. Now, if you look at a map, and they keep showing you the map, he starts out as close as he can to Macedon. He's going through cities that have a significant Greek population but are in the Persian Empire, and he's gradually heading south and east. If you look at a map, you're going to notice Egypt's now behind him. And Egypt is an extremely wealthy part of the Persian Empire. Now, use your head. It's behind him. If he doesn't take over Egypt, he's going to get surrounded by the Persians on both sides. The eastern side of the Persian Empire in Asia and the Egyptians, in the northern part of Africa. Seriously, once again, the women have all the power. Let's blame the women for every time these guys succeed in their ruthlessness. It's really some woman ratting somebody out. Apart from that, it's possible, but again, this is one of those traditions where they're giving women a lot of power that they wouldn't have. Now, counter to that, the Persians were known for their respect for their women, and the noble women of Persia are highly respected and treated very well. And that would be great if Alexander was Persian and he captured a Persian woman who's a member of the royal family. If Alexander were Persian, he'd respect her and he'd think, wow, okay, she could probably tell me things. He's not. He's Greek. They're not known for their respect for women. So this idea that Alexander would think to interrogate the Empress of Persia because he would expect her to know stuff, that doesn't sound too Greek to me, to be completely honest. But yeah, it's another example, as my history professor used to tell us. He would always say, every time you read these histories, in these oppressively sexist regimes, there's always some woman that they're blaming when the guys do something cruel or ruthless. So that's my comment. And, again, I'm rolling with it. I'm not an expert on this at all. But it did kind of annoy me that, oh yeah, here we go again. And they try to dismiss it in the dramatization. Statira's daughter is saying to her, what are you doing? And she says, I'm protecting us. And it's like, I don't think so. And by the way, like I said, Alexander's no fool. I really wouldn't want to be the guy who did terrible things to the Empress of Persia. There's a lot more Persians than there are Macedonians. I'm just saying that could end badly. All right. Meanwhile, moving on, I finished A Lark's Flight by Lynn Messina. And this is the newest book in her Verity Lark series. I'm not all that excited. She's got a new book in the series coming out at the end of February. I did pre-order it. I'm kind of wondering why now. Meanwhile, Maria Grace has just come out with her latest dragon book. And I just started it. It came out on the 14th. It feels like a bridge book that she's starting this major arc of events. And I don't know if I like it yet or not. It feels, I'm in like chapter 3, it feels too compressed. It feels like she's really under-explaining some complex politics in order to get herself through this book, and also probably some fan service, because let's face it, we're all rabid, those of us who like this series. And I can't wait because the audiobook of it should come out, and then I have another thing to go to sleep to, which sounds cold, but there you are. Something I really like, cheap digital storage. I give you the links there for a 4 terabyte external drive that I got on Amazon, reputable company, and it was under $100. It was like $92 before tax and all that. And also I give you a link for, I couldn't believe this, 3 flash drives from a good company. Each flash drive is 64 gig. The whole thing is $15. Digital storage has gotten very cheap. Now, why do I say this? I'm not a big fan of the cloud. The cloud makes a lot of things possible, I grant you. But the cloud uses subscriptions, and you suddenly find yourself paying out in dribs and drabs all over the internet if you're someone like me and you're using the internet as part of your professional work. And now I have a lot of security on this, which makes me happy. Nothing about my patients is on my computers. It all goes into a secure storage that belongs to the group practice that I work with. Okay, so don't worry about that. We have professional note companies and professional charting companies. They've got all sorts of storage and they've got all sorts of security on them. Okay. But I don't really want my personal stuff on the cloud where I can avoid it. And that includes things like my tax records, anything that is personal to me. And so I'm a big fan of these 4 terabyte external drives because I don't think I can fill one in my entire lifetime at this point. And so I have a tendency to just every so often empty everything in my storage, go through my cloud, all my photos, everything, and I put them on these drives. The other reason I like them, my original one was probably something crazy like 256 gig, and it's the size of a hardbound library book. That's really kind of awkward, but you know what I mean. Yeah, these little 4 terabyte drives, these things fit, they're the size of my hand. They're much thinner, much smaller. The reason I like this is a friend of mine years ago started doing this, and I think it's a brilliant idea. You store one with all your records on your premises, but you copy it to another, and you store that off-site somewhere, so that if everything burns down, you've got all your records. Believe me, I like this a lot. So I'm a big fan of the cheap digital storage. Also, I do things like these little flash drives. I put all our tax records on those and on my Remarkable, which is not connected to the internet. And I just am in love with that. Anything too personal goes even off the Remarkable, off the tablets, off the cloud, and goes into my cheap digital storage units, my 4 terabyte external drives. Put a lid on it, no new recipes, but I'm still finishing the Plum Deluxe Advent Calendar. So I've got days 22 and 23. Day 22 was a spiced orange chai. I was pretty good with this. Now, to me, this is an herbal, and they use rooibos to replace the black tea that you normally find in chai. This was good. Was it a chai? I don't believe in herbal chai. I think chai involves black tea. I had an Indian roommate who taught me to make chai many moons ago. And so I did like this. This was a pleasant drink. Primarily, it's rooibos, and then they've got orange peel and lemongrass, and there's some ginger. Like, you do pick up the ginger. Well, of course, good chai is spicy. Good Indian chai. This is nice. This is spicy. It doesn't have the body of what I would think of as a chai, but it's a very drinkable thing. Very pleasant. I really quite enjoyed it. Nice fragrance. Day 24 was called Soul Warmer Herbal. Well, there you go then. That's precise. All right. I'm not big on that name, but it is rooibos tea, apple pieces, cocoa nibs, orange peel, calendula, blue cornflower, hazelnut, chestnut essences, caramel extract. This, to me, was kind of more forgettable than I expected. That I think this was sort of an example of they weren't sure what they were trying to get. And the apple in it came through a little bit. I got more of the orange peel. I'm not a fan of cocoa nibs in tea. I'm not sure what they're supposed to give to it. And I felt like they put the blue cornflowers. That makes it nice looking. And there's the nut essences. I felt this was a little confused. Didn't quite know what it wants to grow up to be. I don't know if this is in their regular rotation, but meh. So on to the blather. First of all, there's a picture of my son in the show notes. We are celebrating at Cheesecake Factory, his new favorite, because he got straight A's. He is in his junior year, so that's his first semester grades, I believe, and we're all pretty happy about that. He's starting to get stoked about going to college. We'll see how that goes, but we're all happy there. And then there is Mrs. Magoo, or Dr. Magoo, the sequel, now moved to Universal Studios. All right, so my friend Nancy blew in from New Jersey, and she's staying in Southern California for a week with her family, and they're all visiting all her friends because she used to live here. And that included me. And so we met at Universal Studios, and we had a really nice day at Universal. But the important thing to me there, as you can see, I'm wearing my new glasses. Hooray! I finally got my regular vision glasses, and I'm not using graduated lenses anymore. I'm just using reading glasses and my regular vision. It's been very interesting because I've kind of lost the middle distance. When you wear the regular glasses, they're for the farther distance. And so a lot of times I have trouble seeing stuff close to me. Weirdly, I can put the reading glasses in front of them, but you still kind of lose the middle distance. But I'm really happy. I can drive again. I got out this week. I should also say going down to Universal was really interesting. Currently, we're waiting to get new tires on my husband's car. So we've been running around with one car. So I got dropped off at a train station, and then I took the train in. Now I was going to get off in Burbank and take a bus right across to Universal, which is the fastest route, except there wasn't another bus coming. By the time the bus arrived, I'd be in Union Station catching the red line. So I went way south to LA to Union Station, then went way north on the underground to Universal. And then at Universal, it's a steep walk uphill. You pick up a shuttle. It was a day of transit. What can I say? I'm really grateful for it. It was actually very pleasant, except I was a little sleep deprived. So by the time I was finished seeing Nancy and back at Union Station, felt like the Walking Dead. Thank goodness for Starbucks at Union Station and the fact you can order it ahead and just walk in, pick it up, and get on your train. And I was so blitzed out. But it was a nice trip. It was a really fun and interesting day. And I'd never tried Universal solely by public transit. And I must say, I enjoy it. I have to tell you also, Disney, from where I live by public transit, is incredibly easy. I doubt I will ever drive to either of them again. In the meantime, we have all the daily house projects. I have not been cutting my fabric strips, so that's a long way to go on that. And I'm done with the t-shirts, so that's nice. I've cut up all the t-shirts I'm going to cut up. The walkway in the front yard, we now have all the strips down that we can get down. And every day I go out and I take 10 pins and I hammer them into the ground to hold this strip in, to hold all the strips in at this point. We have our second set of lights for that, for the solar lights, and so that will be coming, but we have 3 days of rain, so not yet. Nothing on the garage camera. Dogs are doing fine. They're both in the house tonight, Captain and Queenie, because we have rain, and we've also got these other dogs running loose, and so not so much right now. Nothing else. The hub stayed. Everybody's doing well. Project cookbook. I just tootle along, occasionally adding new recipes to the index card collection that I'm building for my son. I haven't been doing anything with the watercolors, and we are just mulching, and my son wants to start weeding, which is great. I really need him to do that. And I'm working mostly on that garden path, so I have not been doing a whole lot there. So really not much is happening here in the blather is what I am trying to tell you. On the calendar, Yarnopoly and Second Saturday Stitchers, both local knit and crochet groups. Actually, both are primarily crochet groups, to be honest. They have links on Facebook, and you have to look them up there. Go to Facebook and just search those names. Both of them meet up on the second Saturday of each month. Typically, Yarnopoly will vary from that. They will basically go around the group and say who can be here next month on the second Saturday. I think Yarnopoly's next is March 16th. I'm not sure where that falls on the calendar. Anyway, and second Saturday, I think second Saturday goes earlier in the day. Yarnopoly's like 1 to 3. But if you're local, these are groups you can look up. Also, there is a sit and stitch group from 9 to noon on the second and fourth Saturday of the month at the Joanne Darcy Library in Canyon Country. Meanwhile, the Cognitive Fiber Retreat number 10 is scheduled for September 28th, 2024, and again, it will be at the Courtyard by Marriott in Valencia, right off the 5. Finally, Romule. I sat down and requested my first 2 days of Romule, which should be the 23rd and the 24th, and I have the 25th off, and I will probably request the 26th and the 27th, and then again, I think it's New Year's Eve, so I have to go and figure that out. But I did already put in my first request. I'm hoping to have off from December 21st to January 2nd, frankly. Underneath all that, if you're in the show notes, you will see the stickers. I just have graphic images of various critters knitting. Interestingly enough, there's not a lot of visuals of people crocheting. So if anybody sees cute crocheting graphics, let me know. I'll add them to the sticker collection. You should feel free to download these and use them on your social media. Finally, Minerva gets the last word. There is a picture there of Minerva and I. We're both lying in my bed, and the funniest thing about it to me is we're both doing the same thing if you're a cat. That is, we are expressing love, that we have narrowed eyes and we're looking straight at the camera. Apparently we both love the camera. But Minerva's last word is communicate. And if you're Minerva, that means you should be speaking her language. But it has dawned on me that my cat has been trying to teach me how to talk ever since I've known her. She doesn't waste her time with my boys doing this, with my husband or my son. My husband is very convinced that Minerva thinks I am just this very willful, stupid cat. Whereas she, according to my husband, she believes that he and my son are humans. So she's constantly trying to communicate with me. Whereas with them, she just fawns all over them and gives them love. But with me, she tries to give me instructions. So at any rate, I now do the eyes thing, which you can try on your cat, which is when your cat is looking at you, slowly narrow your eyes until they're closed. Do that a few times. Why? Well, with humans, we widen our eyes to show surprise or interest. Cats widen their eyes to hunt. So if you see your cat and her eyes get real wide, and then if you're in the daylight, her pupils will get very small, that means you're about to get pounced on. When cats want to show affection, they start closing their eyes because they're signaling they're not hunting you, that they're actually trying to communicate, and usually that's affection. I can tell when Minerva gets that message if I do it to her because she'll close her eyes all the way and you'll see her body relax. If you want to try this, what I would tell you is take a deep, slow breath first, because cats understand that too. It's a sign you're relaxing. And then work on slowly closing your eyes. Interestingly enough, I was watching a video by a horse trainer, and she was pointing out when she wants to communicate with her horse and she wants her horse to calm down, she walks up to her horse, and at a distance where the horse can't reach out and like nip her, she takes a deep breath. And the horse will relax when she does that. I've tried that on our pony Roxy, and she does it too. So Minerva's last word here is use those love lines, speak feline, but basically communicate. Having said all of this and a whole lot more, I'm just going to say, everybody remember, we are in flu season. Everybody's had COVID around here. It's been a mess. So please take care of yourself. Get all those shots. Please take care of everybody around you, because when you take care of the community, you are taking care of yourself. And so on that happy note, everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye. So we have come to the end of another episode of Cognitive. Please do not use this podcast to diagnose yourself. If you think you are having a mental health problem, please contact a licensed mental health professional. Show notes for these episodes can be found at cognitivepodcast, all one word, .blogspot.com. Episodes can be found at iTunes under the name Cognitive Podcast, but also can be found posted next to the show notes on the Blogspot page. Thank you so much for listening. Everybody stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.